Hi, welcome to my session. My name is Jany. I'm an architect and senior researcher in the field of housing. Furthermore, I finished my PhD last month at the University of Technology in Graz. Today, I will give you some insights on my research. Look back to go forward. The Modell Steiermark is cultural heritage for social sustainability. The ongoing urbanization trend is a global phenomenon which results in a lack of affordable and socially sustainable housing in major cities of industrialized nations worldwide. In addition, for the last 40 years, research and development in the field of residential housing have mostly been defined by technical progress. The social requirements of housing have not been updated yet, and currently there is a lack of focusing on people needs and the diversified urban society of today. Pivotal issues are thus the aim of creating affordable and sustainable housing, a focus on society's diversified requirements of accommodation, and also social responsibility of reaching this target. This is a map published by the United Nations in 2010. It shows the current urban population per nation. To understand the colors, green are predominantly rural nations and red predominantly urban nations. In total, more than 50% of the Earth population are living in cities right now. For instance, Austria has currently 66% and the UK 45% of urban population. The prognosis shows that by 2030, more than 75% of the Earth population will live in urban areas. So the increase in population in urban areas isn't unique, it is a worldwide phenomenon. Given that the rising demand in housing is becoming a big issue in all metropolitan areas worldwide. Before we dive into Modell Steiermark, I will give you a short overview about Austria and Styria. As you can see, Austria is situated in the middle of Europe. Styria is a federal state of Austria in the southeastern part. Graz is the capital of Styria and the second largest city in Austria. The housing shortage after the end of the Second World War was high in many European cities. There were two main reasons for this. On the one hand, the shortfall caused by the destruction of the war, and on the other hand, the increase in population after the end of the war. This led to a high demand on the housing market, which had a significant influence on the residential construction activities and also on the emergence of the so-called Modell Steiermark. Satisfying the housing needs of the post-war, the Styrian housing market had been reduced to two basic forms: home ownership, here an example on the left-hand side, and subsidized social housing, here an example on the right-hand side. Both new forms took place on the periphery of the cities. In 1966, 78% of Austrians considered the single-family home in the countryside as the ideal form of living. The individual planning of the future house allowed the owners to realize personal living dreams. The subsidized social housing was the only alternative to a family home and was a standardized housing resulting from the pressure and constraints of the post-war years. The construction and execution of social housing was given by the non-profit building cooperatives. The primary task was the realization of affordable housing in a short time. The building cooperatives planned residential properties for anonymous residents whose individual housing needs were not taken into account and which were characterized by the lack of individual freedom. The architecture group Dominic Hood, based here in Graz, for example, strongly criticized, I quote, "Idea-free floor plans kept to a minimum, without any urban planning, without any relation to the environment, make urban life impossible." Housing construction was largely rationalized in order to provide enough housing. This led to the development of standards in terms of construction technology, floor plans, and design. In 1969, the architect and caricaturist Gustav Peichel criticized the system of housing under his pseudonym Hieronymus. The caricature The Housing Bomber represents the hilly Styria with a crossing airplane. The airplane, titled as Wohnbaugenossenschaft Schöne Heimat, dumps monotonous unitary residential buildings over the landscape. These vary in size but are similar in typology. The illustrated criticism by the caricature can be understood in the temporal context of the 68th generation. The rebellion of the young generation against existing systems, ways of thinking, and views is a symbol of the social generational conflict of this time, which was also reflected in the policy of Styria. The Modell Steiermark started participatory planning within social housing. The architects designed the housing estates not for but with the future residents to meet their residential needs. They've created several hands-on workshops and interviews to design the housing estates with the future residents. Previously, social housing was a matter that was primarily discussed between decision makers and planners. The concept of the Modell Steiermark included the society, the future residents, to plan with, not for them. Through the participation process, the usual zero point in social housing could be avoided. The zero point defines the day on which strangers enter into neighborly relations by moving into identical residential units designed for abstract ideal people and built in schematic plots. Thus, while the conventional housing system consisted of a fixed structure of politics, developers, and administration, the Modell Steiermark integrated the previously overprivileged residents and regarded them as a full member of the system. The residential buildings before were mostly internal planning of the building cooperatives or recurring plans of long-term contracted architects. The additional attraction of external architects and the opening of access in the form of competitions created a new field of tension between three main actors of social housing in the Modell Steiermark. From the beginning of the 1970s until the end of the 1980s, a total of 140 projects using a participatory approach have been documented throughout Austria. Styria stands out with 47 projects and the share of 34%. This is a map of Styria to give you an overview of all participatory planned projects within the Modell Steiermark. And it is good to know the Modell Steiermark projects are just 5% of the whole social housing stock of that time in Styria. In the second part of my work, I've done a survey on housing satisfaction in 6 estates. The hypothesis was residents of participatory housing projects have a higher level of residential satisfaction compared to residents of standardized residential buildings. First, a brief theoretical introduction of housing satisfaction. The theory says that residential satisfaction occurs when the fit between residential reality and residential needs is matched. Here, the residential satisfaction is to be understood as an intersection of these two aspects. Residential reality is defined as the built environment, the houses and outdoor facilities, let's say the closer living environment. The residential needs are understood according to Maslow's theory. For the empirical study, 3 participatory residential projects were compared with 3 standardized social housing estates in the neighborhood. Based on the Modell Steiermark projects, the selection of the estates was carried out using 3 basic criteria. First, the settlement is located in the urban environment of the city of Graz. Second, the settlement corresponds to a multi-party concept, so no single-family dwellings. And third, I do have access to the planning architect. This selection is based on the strong influx into the metropolitan area of Graz. Nationwide, the area of Graz is the region with the strongest previous and also predicted population growth. By 2050, the city is expected to grow by 28%. The survey was carried out in the three neighborhoods Alte Poststraße, Karl-Spitzweg-Gasse, and Terrassenhaussiedlung. All settlements have been built as residential property for the residents. The questionnaire was sent out to 795 residential units. Among many other results today, I will focus on the three main. First, the main hypothesis. Inhabitants of participatory housing projects have a higher satisfaction level compared to residents of conventional residential buildings. The residential satisfaction of participatory housing estates is 4.52. The residential satisfaction of the residents in the standardized estates is 4.03. The scale value expresses the higher the value, the more satisfied the people are. With regard to the two types of settlement and a scale interval of approximately 0.5, this means that people in participatory residential buildings have higher satisfaction with housing than people in standardized housing estates. However, this is rather small based on the scale width of 0 to 5. Based on the summarized results, the main hypothesis is confirmed, although the difference in the value is small. A second result is based on the following hypothesis. Residents of participatory housing projects have a stronger social embeddedness. The hypothesis can be confirmed. On a scale of 0 to 5, participatory housing has reached a total value of 3.77. In comparison, standardized housing estates have a value of 1.84, both at a significance of 0. It follows that people in participatory housing are twice as likely to be involved in their neighborhood compared to people living in standardized housing. Among the current data set, the largest divergence between the two residential typologies is the social embeddedness. Intensive exchange and contact between future neighbors during the planning and construction phase will create stronger social relationships. Due to the fact of early contact of the future residents, common interests, attitudes, and lifestyles can be balanced. The aspect of stronger social sustainability within participatory housing estates can be assumed. Here's another analysis which shows the absolute numbers from the survey with regard to social embeddedness. In participatory housing, 105 people said they have a good social interaction with their neighborhood, in contrast to only 3 people in the standardized housing estates. A final result of this work is the proof of the theoretical assumption that residential satisfaction occurs when the living reality match housing needs. In this analysis, housing needs are expressed by the intensity of change request. The diagram combines the intensity of change request and the level of residential satisfaction. On the left, we can see that participatory settlements have a high satisfaction level of 4.52, with a low intensity of change requests of 5.13. In comparison, the standardized planned types have a satisfaction level of 4.03, with an intensity of the change requests of 7.78. The theory can be confirmed in the present research project that the residential satisfaction is higher if at the same time the intensity of change requests is low. The increase in population in urban areas isn't unique, it is a worldwide phenomenon. The rising demand in housing is becoming a big issue in all metropolitan areas worldwide. Participatory planning can be a key enabler to investigate new concepts based on the needs of the future residents while having a higher residential satisfaction and an exceptional high social embeddedness. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions which might come up. Just send me an email via andrea@jany.at. Thank you.